Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in from beautiful California so early. My name is Mike Chandler, and these are my colleagues Jeremy Kapakis and Ava Jacob. Today we're going to be recapping the mystery shopping experience from a few weeks ago, and then touching upon our dealership interviews that we conducted earlier this week. So a little bit about the mystery shopping. We also went to a Honda and Mazda dealership in Norwood, Massachusetts, Mazda Gallery and Bach Honda. So our shopping experiences were pretty unique from each other. Honda was a much slower process. We were there for over an hour. Probably took 40 minutes before we were in a car test driving. There was a lot of awkward wait time where we were just at desks, kind of wondering what we were waiting for. When we went to Mazda, it was a much quicker process. Within about 5 minutes of being there, we were test driving. I was driving a car, which was a great experience. However, when we went back to the salesperson's office, he had been a salesperson for over 20 years at that dealership. So he had, they say it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, and he didn't seem like he was as big a fan of the iPad as like the salesperson in the next office, for instance, who was using the iPad. But at the same time, we're not saying that you should force salespeople to use the iPad, more just that they should at least be trained and be able to make their decision from there. So now I'm going to pass it off to Ava to discuss the background of our dealership interviews.
Okay, so on November 11th, we went to the North Shore Mazda dealership in Danvers. We were able to interview 3 different dealership employees, including the general sales manager, Eric Swindle, and 2 salespeople, Javon Moxley, a younger salesperson with 3 years sales experience, and Frank Sensitz, an older but tech-savvy salesperson with 20 years of sales experience, but 1.5 in the automotive industry. We were not able to interview the general manager because he wasn't at the dealership at the time and he hadn't responded to our email. We were also unable to interview any customers as we were the only ones there on Monday afternoon. Additionally, a few weeks prior to our interviews, the dealership had been acquired from IRA Motor Group by the Shaker Auto Group. Therefore, the 2 to 3 iPads that they used to have were then taken back by IRA. So our findings were that through our interview process, we discovered it was clear that iPads help the sales process. The employees like to leave them with the customers while they go get cars for the test drives, and they found that the videos offered in the app were pretty useful. One salesman did stress, though, that all the videos should contain as much detail as the Sky Active video. That was really good. An important finding was that both salespeople claimed to have used it on most customers, the iPad. Javon stated that he used the app with all customers, and Frank claimed that he used it with every other. Most of the time, they would tailor what features of the app were shown according to the customer's interests and their technological aptitude, which basically meant that they would show videos to older customers, and then the more interactive features, such as the comparison feature, with the more tech-savvy customers. And Jeremy, you take it.
All right, in terms of analysis, one of the first things we noticed was that the salesman found it more beneficial to use the worksheet for their needs discovery process on the pen and paper than instead of it being implemented into the app. One of the reasons they thought this was because if you use the iPad, it loses a personal touch, and they also said that customers feel uncomfortable sometimes when they see their information entered directly into an electronic device for privacy reasons. Another issue with if you use like a stylus with the iPad is that the iPad's not really designed for a stylus with the type of touchscreen that it has. So you're not able to really use a fine point stylus while you're using it, so you won't be able to write like perfectly and exact like you would on paper. Another one of the things we noticed is that when the salesman gave the iPad to the customers to build trust between them, and this exchange prevented a lot of the anxiety for the customer when the salesman went out to get the car, and they found it beneficial for the customers, even using the iPad, even if they weren't using the Mazda app itself, because sometimes they said they were browsing the web or playing Game of Solitaire, and it said the fact that just they were using it, it got their mind off of thinking how long they were actually being there, and it made it a lot more beneficial in the sales process. Another issue they were talking about when using the comparison feature is that if a salesman wants to use that feature, he needs to know more about the car he's comparing the Mazda to before doing it, because an issue could occur where if you show another company's car that it could actually be better than the Mazda, so you could risk losing a sale. So the salesman needs to be aware of the car that they're comparing the Mazda to prior to showing that to the customer. And based on what the salesmen were saying, they emphasized that speed is an important issue in the sales process. And one idea we had that we thought could improve on it was offering offering access to the inventory list at the dealership on their phone or the iPad, like a web-based app, just like the Mazda app, except having it being able to access it on their phone would be very beneficial, because they could just look at it right where they are. They could take it with them when they go out to find the car and make it a lot easier. And if it was on the iPad, you wouldn't really be able to look at the information while you're getting the car, since you left the iPad with the customer. In terms of recommendations, the first recommendation we had, which we had back after the mystery shopping experience, was to have an iPad app certification program. After talking with the general sales manager at the dealership, he said that every morning they spend about 30 to 45 minutes training employees, and that he agreed that it would be a perfect time to educate the salesman about the app. We think there should be like an iPad app certification test, so that all the salesmen are comfortable with using the app, and there's no excuse why they can't not use it. And the general sales manager also talked about how they already give a product knowledge test at points during this time, so offering a test at this time that the iPad app could be implemented really easily. And we did notice on their monthly training schedule that they have a couple days near the end of this month where they're supposed to teach about the iPads. Another one of our recommendations was to increase the number of iPads at the dealership. At this dealership, when they had them, they said it was about 2 to 3 iPads. When there was about 8 to 9 employees, they definitely said this was not effective at some times, because they just not enough iPads to go around. And they said ideally 1 for each salesman would work, but there should at least be 1 for every other salesman. Another one of our ideas was the kiosk, and from our past presentations, and we still think that this is a good idea. Talking to the salesmen, we found it they found it a good idea, especially they were talking about how sometimes if the dealership's really packed and a customer walks in and has to wait for a salesman, they said sometimes that the customer would actually leave because the waiting time was too long. And if there was a kiosk with the iPad app in the showroom that they could play around with, it could help keep the customer at the dealership and prevent from losing that sale. Also, we talked about having a search feature in the iPad app from the past, and from talking with the salesman, they also thought that this would be a good idea to implement it, because they noticed at times it would be a little slow to navigate around the app, and speed and to quickly access different parts of the app is very important. So we think that should be implemented, along with having to make sure that the iPad's connected to a strong internet connection to make it fast, since the app is entirely web-based. So you either would have to make sure that all the dealerships have a strong internet connection, or you could, if you purchased a new iPad, you can get it with LTE, which is a lot faster network, and you wouldn't have to worry about the Wi-Fi at each dealerships. And with that, we'll open up to questions.
Quick question. You mentioned, or I guess was it just the sales consultant that you were talking to when they brought up the idea of the number of iPads per sales consultants, or have you talked to a general manager or a dealer principal on that?
They all actually kind of brought it up. It was mostly brought up by the two salesmen because they both said that they used the iPad at least on half of their sales, and having less than one iPad for every two salespeople said that a lot of times they'd scramble to look for an iPad when they got a customer, and a lot of the times they wouldn't have it, so it kind of created an inconsistency in their sales processes.
Hey, I have a comment.
When you went,
Hey, Rob, the folks at Mazda, when we took over that store, I believe that their iPads were already stolen. I don't think anybody took them from the old dealership. And if we go in and check the analytics that we have on when the last time they actually used an iPad, you'd be surprised. So here you are doing an interview with research that we're going to depend on, and we're going to go look later and see when actually the last time the guy logged in and used it, and then we're going to go, you know, bullshit or no bullshit, right? You're going to call bullshit. So we're going to figure that out because we have that information. The second thing that I think is important is that we are implementing the iPad later this month because we knew we couldn't implement iPad without first implementing and going through as a acquirer of a dealership. As someone who buys a dealership, we can't go in and say, here's iPad. If they don't know the sales process and they don't know all the steps to the sale first, then you can't effectively teach the iPad. So even though we came up with the whole idea, we haven't even introduced it until over 6 weeks into owning a dealership because we know the steps to get it right. So some really good feedback from there. As far as the amounts of usage, you know, how many are necessary? That's something we're struggling with too. Maybe you guys on the December 5th can kind of maybe call back one of the salespeople or, you know, reach out because we'd like to know how many iPads we should set as a standard per salesperson. Now I know we're tight on time, Pooley, so I don't.
Yeah, sorry.
Just to comment on that, they did say, at least one of them said, he thinks that there should at least be one iPad for every two salespeople.
Okay, excellent.
Just to get some feedback.
We could test that in the survey too.
Yeah.
What you mentioned at the beginning, the difficulties you had when you went to the Ernie Bach Honda store, did they also have the kiosk that was mentioned by the first group, and any comments on that of trying to help overcome that long wait time? I mean, the way you spoke about it was a very negative overall experience.
We didn't see any kiosks because we were escorted to desks, and so we were just seated, and from what I observed, we didn't see any kiosks.
And I mean, most of the process was fine. The only time that was really awkward was at the end because we thought after the test drive, it seemed like we were pretty much done and ready to leave. But he made like an excuse that he had to prove that we took the test drive even though he already copied our driver's license. So then he just brought us in and sat us at this desk with only one chair for the three of us. And we were waiting there for like 5 minutes and didn't even know what we were waiting for.
That was at Honda.
Sorry,
We're going to go on to the next team.